The Bible says that we as believers are to be subject to the higher powers. The Bible says this in Romans 13. What are these powers? In fact, what are these powers in the United States today at this point in history? What does that look like? How do they work? And more importantly, how do they affect our lives as believers? There are a variety of issues that involve Christians today, both directly and indirectly. These issues, many of which are determined by our Supreme Court. A current one, for example, is abortion. But there are many others as well. It is possible, in fact, probable, that not all of us are up to date or up to speed on the processes involved as the Supreme Court settles these issues. And so we're setting aside 2, if needed, 3 Sunday evenings to go to class on these processes and the impact of the court's decisions, which will be handed down in the next several months. It's the Oasis class on Sunday nights that will be hosting this at 6 p.m. on Sunday nights. Again, not this Sunday night, but the next 2 Sunday nights after that. We will not be streaming these Sunday nights. At the same time, we want there to be opportunities for real-time questions and discussions. My dad, Lee Coppock, is going to host these studies and lead these discussions, and he's going to tell you a little bit more about it.
What I'm about to do is give you notice. And when I say that, I mean that I'm going to warn you in advance that these sessions may be academic, and they may seem rather dry. As a matter of fact, they'll likely be both. But they will also be informative, or we believe they will, with the objective of educating, equipping those who wish to engage in constitutional discussions, including but not limited to abortion. In other words, there may be occasions when a person just wants to educate themselves or to understand even better what the Supreme Court has said about a particular case, the big one, of course, currently being abortion. There will be a number of terms that we will be introducing, and these terms may seem common. As a matter of fact, there will be some familiarity with these terms, but in the context of a Supreme Court case or in the context of the law, those terms have an alternative meaning, or in that particular context, they mean something else. Among those terms will be judicial review, jurisdictions, standard of review, it's a big one, state action, standing, stare decisis, due process, and penumbra. Those are just among the terms that we expect to explain in the context of Supreme Court cases and the way the law is affected by those. We're going to be talking about the freedoms in the First Amendment, and we may discuss some other amendments as well, but particularly in the First Amendment, as most everybody would know, there are 5 freedoms mentioned, 3 of which most often are impacted when we discuss the rights enshrined in the Constitution for Christians. Those would be freedom of religion. That's the first one, of course, isn't it? Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. There's actually 2 clauses there. You picked it up as I quoted that, or you didn't, but the first one is what's called the No Establishment Clause. And that's where really we get this discussion about the separation of church and state. We'll explain that. There is no exception to that. As far as I know, in history, there is no exception to the first clause of the First Amendment. The second clause of that, the Free Exercise Clause, it's frequently referred to as or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, is the way the Constitution says it. There are exceptions. There are several exceptions, and we'll talk about those and why some of those make a lot of sense. One of the other freedoms in the First Amendment, which we'll discuss briefly, affect us directly, freedom of assembly, and another one, of course, freedom of speech. Before we finish this discussion in those 2 evenings, of course, we're going to talk about Supreme Court cases specifically that impact abortion, which happens to be the one on the top burner right now, on the front burner. Roe v. Wade, of course, decided in 1973. There's a case that came before that in 1965, which sort of set the table for that. We may mention that briefly. There's a case that follows Roe v. Wade. It came down in 1992, Planned Parenthood versus Casey, which frankly, candidly, is more current. There's some adjustments made, some modifications, some nuances to Roe v. Wade that was changed in Planned Parenthood. We'll be sure we understand that. And then, of course, there's Dobbs versus Jackson's Women's Health Organization, which was argued, many of you would have read about this, at the beginning of this month, beginning of December 2021. The decision is supposed to be handed down maybe early June of 2022. And that's the one, of course, that's gotten a lot of attention, a lot of discussion from people as it has been argued and as it's being even now decided by the Supreme Court. One of the reasons that the preacher, I think, has agreed, and I have asked that we not stream this, is so that we can have lots of opportunities for questions and comments. That we expect there to be some discussion. And frankly, we think that's going to be helpful. We think it's going to be healthy. But we're going to do our best to avoid partisan political views. I can tell you that sometimes questions like this, which are political in many ways, they can degenerate into something that is not particularly edifying to the saints. So we're going to do our best to not allow our conversations, which we hope will be several, our discussions, which we hope will be several, questions which we hope will be answered. We're going to do our best to avoid letting those degenerate, at least in my view, that it's a degeneration into partisan political views. In any event, we hope this study will be meaningful, that we think the timing is good, and we certainly expect to answer some questions during those 2 Sunday evenings. Lord bless you, and we look forward to seeing you then.